The Bible tells us that we should make a joyful noise to the Lord. And I think the kids helped us to understand at least one part of that verse. But we're so glad that they've been able to help us out today. We've still got some more songs to sing to you, but we wanted to bring you sort of a culmination of what we've been talking about during the month of December, and that is Christmas. But Christmas not from Matthew chapter 1 or Luke chapter 2, but from John chapter 3. And in fact, in John chapter 3, it tells us the reason that we celebrate this time of year. And it's not just to have a nice little story. It's not just to have a reason to give presents or to put up lights or things like that. It's to remind us of the greatest gift that was ever given to anybody. And it was given by God to us. John chapter 3, verse 16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." Julius Caesar, the most famous of the Roman emperors. A jumbo jet, the most famous of the airplanes. The Victory, the most famous of the sail ships. Mount Everest, the most famous mountain. Sherlock Holmes, the most famous detective. And John 3:16, probably the most famous verse in the Bible. But what does it actually say? And what does it actually mean? I believe that these 27 or so words, depending on which translation you're reading, actually sum up the entire Christian faith. And that they contain everything we need to know in order to get out of this life alive. Most people, believe it or not, most people in the world actually do believe that there is a God. Now, some people might believe that he's some sort of an impersonal force, or that there is some directive. But they believe that there's something out there. We believe that the reason most people believe that is because God puts it within their hearts. A longing and a desire and a need to know their Creator. But what most people struggle with is, who is this God? And what is he like? Is he some old man in a white beard? A bit of a doddering person who doesn't really know what's going on anymore? Is he some sort of impersonal force that just holds things together, but we can't really know him personally, not the way we know each other? Is he some sort of a superhuman, like the gods on Olympus or the Norse gods of old? What if I told you that this verse that we just read is now nearly 2,000 years old, and it actually teaches us a lot about who this God is? You notice that this verse, which is actually a quote from Jesus talking to an individual, this verse tells us that God loved the world. He's not disconnected at all. He's not an impersonal force. In fact, he loves. He's shouting from the mountaintops, "I'm here. Listen to me. Pay attention." You might think, well, I've never heard him. I know astronauts have gone up into space and they've looked around and they said, "I don't see him." But if you listen carefully, you hear him constantly through events in your life that you can't explain, through happenstances that we might call lucky. When you look up into the sky and you see the stars, and you realize your insignificance compared to the universe. When you look at your own self and realize how intricate and amazing you are. That and many, many, many other things. That's God telling you, "I'm here." But he's not just here. He loves us. But what is love? At this time of year, we see lots of ads on the television tugging at our heartstrings to give money to donkeys and poor children, pets and lifeboats, all these different things. And I'm not saying that any of those are a bad cause. But when you watch those adverts on the telly, you feel sad. You feel bad for children in war-torn areas around the world. You feel bad for donkeys who have to work so hard that it eventually kills them. You feel bad, but do you love them? Because see, the difference between feeling bad for somebody and their condition and loving them is when you love them, you do something about it. And that's what God did. He didn't just look down on our condition and think, boy, what a bunch of rotten sinners they are. They go around killing each other for no reason, and they place priorities on things that shouldn't be placed, and they steal from each other, and they're just a bunch of really bad people. And I feel really bad for them because they could be better. God didn't do that. God loved us. So he did something about our badness, our evil, our sin. What did he do? He sent his son. Not just to come and be an example and say, see, if you're like him, you could be a better person. Then you could have a better life. And if you could get good enough, why, then you could spend eternity with me. That's not why he sent Jesus. He sent him so that he could die for us. That's why Jesus came. And when we talk about God sending Jesus, it wasn't as though Jesus came against his will, because Jesus himself is God. When Jesus came to the earth, it created a problem. God sent his son into the world, and that's what we celebrate at this time of the year. He sent him to prove his love for us. And it turns out that the gift that God sent was, in fact, himself, his son. But when Jesus turned up, his deity, that's a theological term for his godness, shined through. And he became the best human being that the world had ever seen. He became all that we were meant to be. He never once committed a sin. Never, ever, once. He never even thought a bad thought about someone. He never once was selfish in his motives. As much as we love giving gifts at Christmas, it sometimes has the opposite effect that we intend, doesn't it, when we give presents to each other? Have you ever seen a little child open up a present with a great big smile on his face or her face, and joy and happiness, ripping it open, and then say, socks? We used to hear that a lot. They should have gotten used to it. And all of a sudden, there's a little bit of selfishness, a little bit of unhappiness, even though we gave a gift. Jesus never ever experienced any sort of a sin, not even in attitude or motive. And you know what? People hated him for that. Just like birds of a feather who stick together, sinners do the same thing. And sinners didn't like being shown their sin. And that's one of the things that Jesus did. And so eventually, they killed him. Actually, Jesus let the people kill him. He laid down his life for us. Just as Jesus wasn't born in a manger against his will. He wasn't hung on a cross against his will. He was put there because that's why he had come. And he allowed himself to become a sacrifice. But not for himself, because he had never committed a sin. He didn't deserve to die. Not to make a good example of what love is all about. He allowed himself to be sacrificed to provide a payment for sin. Since that wasn't his own sin, we realize that that was our sin. It was our sin that he paid for on the cross with his death. Notice the end of the verse, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. The gift God gave was Jesus himself. The result of that gift, if we will believe in what he did for us on the cross, the result of that gift is eternal life. Now, we'll still die, all of us, most certainly, most likely. And what God is talking about is the real life that starts after this one. Because if we don't believe, and if you were to go to John chapter 3 and read the verses after this, if we don't believe, then we're condemned. And we won't have eternal life. We are condemned to a Christless, godless eternity in hell. The reason we go to all of this effort as a church is because we need desperately for you to know why Jesus came to pay for your sin so that you could live forever. He didn't just die. He died in your place, and he died in my place. This Christmas, maybe you've already started with the mince pies and the sausage rolls, and maybe you've already started with opening gifts. We're about halfway through in my house. And maybe you'll get through this Christmas and you'll think, that was a great Christmas. That was really good. Got some good presents, had some great food, some wonderful memories. And next year, Facebook will pop up and say, 1 year ago, here's what you were doing. Oh, that was a good Christmas. Yeah, I remember that. And maybe you'll have 10 more or 20 more or 50 more great Christmases. But what happens when this life is over? Why not make this Christmas a Christmas worth celebrating? Celebrating new life in Jesus. Why not finally believe in who God truly is? A loving and caring and giving God. A God who is willing to do whatever it takes to save you from death. Maybe some of the things that I've said, or maybe some of the words and some of the carols or some of the readings have created questions in your mind. Let me encourage you. Talk to someone about that. Ask more questions. We're happy to help. We're happy to answer those questions for you. We want you to know, and we want you to believe. Not so that you can just come and fill up this church building, but we want to spend eternity with you. And if something that has been said today has sparked some questions or some concerns, please make sure you talk to somebody about that. Thanks for listening. We're going to spend a few more minutes singing some songs, and we're going to start with a couple of congregational ones I know you're familiar with. Pay attention to the words of these songs. They were written by people who believed these same things that I just said to you.